So one of the things that I want to be able to start is to introduce the panel. And the last person I'm going to introduce is Evan Whitehead, who's one of our district liaison. And we have a short video of the survey that we did with one of the districts that he works at to kind of talk about the work that he did there. But before I do that, I really want to introduce our panel, who's going to spend a little bit over an hour with us answering some questions and sharing their work. So the first person all the way on the left, I want to introduce Don Anderson. Don Anderson, you can wave, Don.
Hey. Good morning, everybody.
And Don has been a principal for many years, has been a leader in the turnaround work, and really looking forward to get his insights around this work at a building level. Next to him is Daniel Duke, who's our featured keynote speaker. Daniel Duke is one of the national experts around this work, has done this in a variety of contexts and worked with states and districts to do this work. This is one of the main reasons why we brought the supporting cast together to be able to give Don a little bit of the context here in Illinois, but also to be able to share what are some of the things that have been working, not just at the district level, but at the state level. So very glad to have you here, Don. I will be shocked if people in this room do not know Jennifer. Jennifer is quickly becoming a rock star in Illinois for her turnaround work in Sandoval. I want to say Sandoval, but it's Sandoval School District, and she is somebody that I was with folks in CPS yesterday doing some work explaining and seeing how we're going to coordinate our statewide system of support, and somebody in the meeting was like, have you met Jennifer? Isn't she great? Jennifer's wonderful. I was like, yes, we're actually having something with Jennifer tomorrow. So I felt very proud and honored that
I do not take praise very well, so thank you.
Yes, thank you, Jennifer. Next to her is Linda Shay, and for, again, another well-known person in Illinois. Linda currently right now is leading the work for the school improvement grants in the state, has a great amount of experience and information, and again, is going to be able to give us the state perspective, the goals, and the objectives that the states will like us to begin to do as we begin this work. And so what I would love, yes, big round of applause. I want to thank Danielle and Patricia for this because they worked really hard to getting this panel together, so I want to thank you all for doing that. So I would love to begin the panel presentation first by this video that was prepared to us by one of the districts that we're working with. Can somebody turn down the light over there, please?
My name is Joel Pollack. I'm the Deputy Superintendent of North Chicago Community and School District. North Chicago, over the past 20 years, has really persistently failed its students as a district. State Superintendent made a bold move not only to remove the superintendent, but also to remove the locally elected board. Brought in a chief executive officer and a chief education officer charged with turning things around. We, internal to the district, have been working on dramatically transforming operations of the district and schools, instruction, and culture and climate throughout the district. As part of that work, we are working with several external partners. We have lead partner, Academy for School Leadership, through our school improvement grant. There are several community foundations, such as North Chicago Community Partners, Lake County Community Foundation, and some corporate partners that are working to help us with after-school programming and building community schools. And we've also worked with the State Board and the Regional Office of Education. And we have a lot of players in North Chicago. I think one of the things that we're not looking for is for someone to come in and essentially start over. There have been several very high-level needs assessments. There have been several very high-level interventions. And at this point, we have a very clear sense of the urgency of improvement and a very clear sense of the core work that needs to be done. And so what we need is someone who can come in, understand what we're doing, and then really add value and expertise from that perspective, not saying let's stop and evaluate everything and then chart our way forward. So as this work is launching and building a critical mass for change, we started our relationship relationship with the Center for School Improvement. And as part of that, Evan Whitehead came in as our district liaison. And he entered the work really listening and working together, Evan and myself and the senior leadership team, to make sure that we have a very, very clear picture of what's happening and what the results are of our work in North Chicago. And we're collaborating on identifying next steps. And I think that has a potential for a great synergy between the district and CSI. And that's what I look forward to working together with Evan and building.
Great. Lights, please. So in starting the conversation, Evan, can you share with us how did you approach entering the districts, and how did you approach explaining our services to the district leadership?
Sure. This is all new work for me. I'm a previous school administrator, district administrator. So for me, coaching is a new aspect. And, the way that I approach this work has always been about two things. One, I always think about it as if I were on the other side and how I did the work and when I thought about folks coming in to support me. Two is the other thing, which is the most important, and that most people here that know me and the things I talk about is really about building relationships. And that's key to the work that needs to go on here in Illinois CSI and really district and school improvement work. And with the districts that we work with, in particular, we have what we call an introductory meeting that we work with districts. And one of the first meetings that I had with myself and also my area director was with one of the districts that we did not know much about them. We had done our research, like all the district liaisons in Illinois CSI do, and we entered this meeting and arrived at the location, really thinking about, okay, how is this meeting going to go? What is this about? The district previously had worked with the Regional Office of Education in the previous statewide system of support. And for us, it was a new challenge. It was a new beginning. So when we got there, you could feel that there was something different in the environment there. They knew that we were coming, and it was almost a little bit of a tension in the air because we were, to them, the State Board of Education coming in to talk to them. So as we got into the foyer and we were met by security, we told them that we were there. We waited, and we waited, and we waited, and there were just kind of whispers of who's there, and then as we were greeted by the assistant for the associate superintendent, she walked us to the back of the office, and we met with the associate superintendent and director of school improvement, and you could see the angst on their face. You could see the body language. You could feel it, that there was something, they were a little unsure about what this all means. So, we sat down and as we had one of those long tables, and I looked and I could see piles of documents in front of them. And as I looked across, on the top document was the Illinois CSI letter that the districts received notifying them of the type of services that they're eligible for. And so we sat down and we were talking about it, and we were telling them about Illinois CSI and what we're able to offer and what we do. And then they started talking to us about all the things that they've already done to correct situations previously. And I kind of stopped in midstream and said, I just want to tell you something so you feel comfortable with us. And that I told them, I said, you can relax because we are not the school and district improvement police. And that really kind of set them to feel, you could see the body language change, and it was a sigh of relief because they didn't know what it meant to be identified for these services. They thought that this was us coming in to tell them what they did wrong and possibly, having some other consequences for that. But since that has happened, I can say the relationship with the district has been great. They feel that they can trust us. They feel that, they can have kind of conversations about the work that they would like to do, what's happened in the past. And, for me, that's really, all I knew, and, when I talked to senior leadership and Jose about this, they said, can you talk about, school and district improvement work and district liaison? And, I said, this is new for me, and we haven't been doing this work that long, to talk about the results of what we've been doing is providing services, but I can tell you, though, the things that I've done and my colleagues have done throughout the state to get us in the door and establish some of those relationships with the districts. You know, Jose talked about the district needs assessment that we're doing throughout the state with our 29 districts. And the relationship building, you know, you see it, and you see that it's worked, because all of us that are district liaisons are doing work in other districts that are not ours, districts we don't work with. So when you are able to go in those districts and you get the response that's positive, you know, folks are willing to work with you, and they accommodate you, and they work with your schedule, you know that statewide, the district liaisons are doing the work that we need to do. So that's really, you know, how I approach the work and what I've been doing. It's been successful for me thus far. You know, we kind of put our best foot forward, and, you know, it's been successful.
Great. Thank you, Evan. Linda, from your perspective, in terms of the work that you do at the state, what is the role that the leadership that you expect in terms of the leadership of the district to be able to start? You know, we just talked about how Evan starting this work with the district. From the state's perspective, what do you expect from the districts around this work?
Well, Jose, I'd like to start out, I think, by praising the state of Illinois for a couple of things that they have done very well to move us into turnaround. And one of those things that I want to remind us about is that maybe 1-2 years ago, could be longer than that, the state actually took on sunsetting all of the principal preparation programs in the state, because we realized that there were thousands of candidates going into a Type 75 certificate program, but only a few actually going into the role of the principal. And the colleges of education were spending enormous resources on those programs, and they were also making enormous financial gains from those programs. But our schools were not benefiting, because if the Type 75 certificate preparation was a school improvement credential truly, with 4,000 or so candidates every year obtaining those, we'd have great schools, wouldn't we? So one of the things that the state did very courageously was to sunset all of those programs and to reestablish them using the ISLIC standards. And today I think there may be 26 or so that are recertified. But those programs are not standalone programs. They must also include a district partner. And we learned when I was in Chicago that the district can actually set the tone for the kind of credential and the kind of preparation that they want to see in their leaders. And this goes back down to our work around the Chicago principal competencies. There were just 5 big areas that were very fully focused. And so I think that the state has been very courageous in that act in thinking about what they want in a school leader. What are the skills and the dispositions and the orientations toward the work? Because the work is not, as Joel reminded us, coming in and correcting something and having multiple plans here. The work is about making schools hospitable places for all children in a way that has not been part of our history. And I'm also informed here by change leadership, this idea of a technical response being inadequate and that adaptive responses being where we need to head. And so school leaders need to enter this work with that kind of an orientation, and I think that is one area that I would praise the state for under Susan Morrison's leadership, and of course Linda Tomlinson, who's recently retired and is an iconic figure that many of you know. I think another area where there is praise around this, what we expect in leaders, is para and the practice of teachers and the introduction of the Danielson framework and our focus on that relational interaction between the teacher and the student. That is where the knowledge work occurs. And I think helping school leaders really focus on that and growing that in our teachers is a critical, previously underdeveloped area. And again, the state is taking a very bold step in saying this is what we want in our classroom practitioners. So I expect that everyone that's connected with the work of the Illinois Center for School Improvement will be very conversant in the Danielson framework and in these school leader dispositions as well to help move us forward. I think when I think about the turnaround principles, I think another area that the state has done some good work in that is very underreported at this point is the work that Marcy Johnson was leading across the agency to really develop a family engagement policy and set of principles. I think you'll see that more legs will need to be attached to that work because family and community engagement is a very critical piece of turning around these schools where communities have not tended to be consulted about them. And we come in and we impose a certain set of requirements, and then we leave, the leaders leave, and who's left? The community, that public that we're supposed to be serving. And so really having an attitude that is organic around family and community engagement and recognizing the assets in places that we tend not to see potential is very, very important, and is a place that I think the state is going to lead in the future. And I do think that that work will be integrated into our turnaround and transformation efforts ultimately. So I think, Jose, that may be where I pause for a moment, but not before saying that one other bold action was for the state to interrupt the previous statewide system of support and begin to replace it with a more contemporary, modern structure in which the individuals that are recruited into the work possess these competencies and are credible with our school leaders, so that these changes can be made possible. And so I want to praise the state also for being very brave once again in saying to each other, our peers, this is not working, and for awarding that contract to the American Institutes for Research and establishing the Illinois Center for School Improvement. It really is groundbreaking work nationally. And you now know how hard this shift for us organizationally is. So those are our four big areas that I think I would praise the state in, and we certainly have more work to do.
Great. Thank you, Linda. And all of Illinois CSI thanks you also. So Jennifer, you know, same question, but one, if you could describe to folks that don't know the work that you've done, that would be great just to be able to see what you've done. And I think the second part of that to me is like, how would you describe your change leadership as you've gone through that work?
Good morning. First of all, I have to acknowledge that I could not do this by myself, and I think that's one thing that as change agents going into districts, you need to realize you need to be committed as a team. So Linda Brissenden is my transformation administrator. Please stand up, Linda. We do everything together. We text and email almost 24/7, and it's wonderful just to have the time for us to actually sit and travel together. So first of all, from a change perspective, and I'm going to kind of ask probing questions as well so I can understand where you're going. The 29 priority districts, I'm not sure who they are or how they're committed, but we heard North Chicago say the state superintendent made a bold move. They actually were taken over. Sandoval has committed to a school improvement grant. So I was hired 5 years ago to come in and transform the district. My school board made that commitment. Without the school board's commitment, this would not have been possible because we had to choose a model. We chose transformation, not turnaround, and those are the federal turnaround models. We were close talking to the union of the turnaround model, but the teacher union felt if it was 30% of our teachers that we could turn over, they would have gone for it. But for you to know now, 3 years later, or 2.5, we have turned over 60% of our high school staff. That is huge. So not only did the school board make the commitment, but the union made the commitment as well. And I was specifically hired because the board had the vision that we did not want to be historically low performing anymore, because it was what's the flavor of the day from the state. That's what my school district got for professional development. So whether it was ResPro or SSOS, or even some can talk about quality review way back in the day. So there was no consistent professional development or vision for the district. And from a district perspective, the vision is really, that's my job, to understand where we're going and then helping put everything together, whether it's PARA, RTI, the Danielson framework, and Common Core state standards or college and career readiness. I know we're in a transition of what we are to call them. So without that vision, without that commitment, we would not have been successful. So that's a challenge I think I have for the state board is, as you go into the districts, what are the consequences for these districts if they choose? You as a team go in, you're committed to listen, but if they're not willing to change, then no matter how much you want to see that happen, it's not going to happen. So that's my biggest message as you work with these 29 districts is, without a hammer or a consequence for the districts who choose not to, we've historically been low performing. We know how to play the game. So you have to come in and think about things differently. From a CSI perspective, I can respect what Evan said, and my Area 5 team I want to compliment as well. I was a superintendent that would probably had the tense body language when they walked in, because I have had the clear vision, and we have with the school improvement grant as well, and I think they probably read me pretty quick, like, okay, we know her personality. And I can say I was frustrated at first because I didn't understand and I didn't know enough. Right. But within 4 weeks or a month, then it was, okay, they're listening. They know where we're at, and so we're still struggling with math. We have huge gaps in our math curriculum. So that's going to be our focus, and we have our target that we're, and I'm sorry I lost the word.
Worthy target.
Worthy target, thank you.
Worthy
I'm still
target.
learning. Sorry, worthy target.
Call and response here.
But the worthy target, we integrated into our current district leadership team. So it's our next step, so it doesn't feel like we're changing directions. And I think that's a challenge right now, is helping districts understand how you put all of that together for a continuous improvement model. I don't know if I answered your question, but that's where I want to start.
That's great, and there's actually 3 things in there that we could actually follow up with later, but I want to give Don an opportunity to answer that question in terms of the work that you did at the school level, since you know that our shift in the statewide system of support went from school to the district. One of the big questions that our coaches and our teams are having is, in making that shift, what is it that you think, from where the great work that you did at the high school, what is it that you think that the districts could do to support the leadership at the school level?
It was at elementary, but I did a lot of work with high school and elementary, and maybe I'll back up to say, to start it, to recognize what a turnaround is, and I look at things like medical treatments, right? That this is not going in for minor surgery, you go home, and a couple days later you're up and moving and back to life. This is major surgery with a year of recovery and an alteration of your whole life. And with that respect, many people can't do that. They can't fully recover. They can't change their lifestyle, and they fall back. And I think, so that's a good analogy to this. This is also, if you look at sports, this is not the one game. This is the major, not a bike race, I like to bike race, but this is the Tour de France, where all the resources have to go in and sustain over time. So with that said, when I went into the school, it was at the end of my career a few years ago. Previous to that, I had worked with Chicago Public Schools in central office. I had worked with Learning Forward, then National Staff Development. So I'd set up professional development systems for turnaround schools in New York and the Bronx, which was their lowest achieving schools. I had worked as a coach for Chicago Public Schools, coaching a school that had 8% at or above level, 8%. So I had seen and worked with schools, principals, districts on multiple levels. So it was almost an experiment for me when they said, hey, this school needs to be turned around. Will you go in and work and turn this around? So my 2 goals were, we're going to create this school that's high achieving, and we're going to do it in the least amount of time. So we're going to maximize results and minimize time. And it was almost, in my mind, it was like a little project, a game, a science experiment. How fast can we get this to bring about sustainable results? So to do that, it had to be extremely strategic. It had to be very high risk taking, had to be supportive. So in that, I bring that back to, who are we recruiting for that major surgery? We're not going to the local physician. The Tour de France teams don't get anybody on those teams, the World Series teams. Musicians pull the best. So as you go into this, assumedly we're taking the best leaders with a huge amount of expertise. to go into these schools so that they're very aware of not just protocol, policy, structures, but also the context, the relationships. That they can go in, and as we heard in the video, we've really failed our students. Confront those facts, confront that, be honest about it, accept it, and embrace that. This is a challenge, this is a positive of where we're going. Jeff Spencer does a lot. He wrote a book, Blueprint of Champions. And what he talks about, the difference between human and being a champion. And to do that, what it means is we have to have the foresight, the strategic planning, the resource bank with us, and then sustain that over time. So in the school, what I felt personally and what I've seen with others is, do I get the data, do I get the resources, do I get the real facts of where we are contextually and evidence-wise? Do I have the right people in the right places, doing the right things at the right times to maximize these results? And am I doing that? Do I have somebody who's coaching me, not just the team, but do I have someone who comes to me and makes me articulate so that I can ready, fire, aim, in words of Roland Barthes, so that I'm taking action, but I'm articulating that and getting feedback and reflection from someone who is an expert, who, again, kind of the coach, athlete. Michael Jordan had a coach. Professional musicians have coaches. So even the highest achieving people need somebody to analyze objectively, to give feedback, to help them work through where they're going, to sustain them over time. So with that, you have the resource, the data, strategic planning, the right people. To do all this, honestly, we can't work within, and Evan, you talked about that, we can't work it within the same structures, the same constraints, but we have to have leeway because these are the highest skilled, the highest creative people we can get for those situations, for the jobs, to make those happen. So in order to bring that down to the level of the staff within the school, how does that person bring every child, every parent, every staff member from the lunchroom to the custodial on board with these high expectations, saying we are going to achieve, we won't fail the kids, and that we're going to be open to people coming into our school, our district, but we're also going to stand up and fight for what's right and do it in a dynamic, huge, massive level in a very short time span versus drawn out over time. And I think the one piece that, Linda, you kind of alluded to, well, Stead, that we go in and we can do this. So a district can come in and impose this, principal can come in, a state, but what is there after the 1, 3, 4, 5 years to sustain that over time? Are we really doing, going back to our analogy, we had the major surgery, did we do the lifestyle, can we sustain that? Do we have the resources that will last over time? Do we have the people, that shared leadership, that lattice within the school, within the district, that will support that over time and sustain that thinking, that philosophy, and those expectations?
Great. Thank you, Dan. So everybody's done, and we're going to hear from Daniel soon. So we've had the opening statements. Does anybody have any questions from what you've heard so far? And we're going to have this question period open between now and around 11 for the next 25, 30 minutes from what you've heard. I'm going to ask a follow-up question to them, but if any of you have any questions, please come up and give them questions, because you're not going to get this panel in this room again. So it'll be a good opportunity for you to ask questions. So here's a question for you all. In terms of the work that you've stated right now initially, of what you think you know, the role that leadership will play in the turnaround, what are some of the, I guess, unexpected areas that, and I'm looking at you, Jennifer, just because I'm sure there was a lot of unexpected stuff, but we'd love to hear from everybody at the table. What are some unexpected areas that you really, where your leadership was tested and you thought this is something that really we need to address, that was just unexpected as you embarked on this work?
Just one.
Just one, right. We only have 15, 20 more minutes.
Sure, I understand. I guess the most, and this is broad, but when I signed on to be the superintendent to transform a school district, I knew I had a challenge ahead of me. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. It is the hardest job that I've ever loved to hate at the same time. because, I mean, right now we're going through challenges. We have a nasty school board this evening, but we still have to be committed to the change no matter what we have in front of us. We're very high poverty. We depend on general state aid. We have low property wealth. So with Illinois funding general state aid at 85%, as Dawn said, how am I going to sustain what we have done? And we've showed results. We have the leading indicators and the lagging indicators now to show that what we're doing works. So it's building that capacity internally, but I truly don't think that research, because I just attained my doctorate degree, and I did it around turnaround because it helped me reflect as I was doing my dissertation, so I didn't feel so alone. So as far from a school, the biggest thing I did not expect was, I mean, that's just how hard it was going to be and how messed up a system can actually be. No, I mean, they know this, so I can talk to my school board about this. It's not that I'm talking in confidentiality to you, but I remember it was this, I was listening to a webinar when we were writing the school improvement grant for the second time. And you have to build from the foundation. And I think that was the biggest thing. We drew the house as we were writing the school improvement grant. We had our stakeholders in the room. This is when we were doing our district needs assessment. And it was really like from the school board to administration, to the custodial staff, to the cooks, to the teachers, the system, everything needs transformed. And my lofty goal was to do it in 3 years. Now I've been there 5 years and I'm like, man, it's still not where it needs to be. So having that commitment and that resiliency to commit to turning around a district. I don't know if that's...
Yeah. Anybody else? Don, Linda?
I guess I can, what I find, and it's interesting, the timeline, I think, of how fast you can get that done and how do you keep forging ahead, because I think everybody's continuously telling us, let's slow down, oh, you can't get that. I think there's just, and in your book, your article, you point out these hindrances that we run up against, and it's there all the time. I think the biggest one that I was amazed at, and again, I had worked with all these different schools, levels, and so on, is there was 1,000 kids, 85 staff members. The entrenchment. Now, part of this context was they fired the principal who had been there 2 years, who really drove this down. They had 14 violations in special ed, things were out of compliance, there were illegal things, scores were going down about 10% in those 3 years previous. But the entrenched attitude, I had never ever seen any group so strongly adverse to working outside of themselves. So their own personal gains came before kids, before colleagues. They refused to see the data, refused to see the facts, and as we kept, then we cleared all the state, became a model special ed program, model bilingual program, scores in the middle school, math went up 14%, reading was up 12%, everything was just glowing, and they still said, this isn't right, we shouldn't be doing, we should go back to what we used to do. And so it took 2 years. We went from a level 3 to a level 1 in 2 years, which was pretty phenomenal. And all of that just amazed me. And this group kept shrinking and shrinking from 15 people to 10 to 8. But boy, it just, I had never seen such obstinacy to change when it's hitting them in the face that this actually can help you. That, I think, was the most amazing thing I'd ever seen.
Linda?
Well, Jose, one of the things I'm noticing that I'm surprised about is that when districts commit to the school improvement grant, for example, Kurt Miller, who was on our team previously, talked about this notion of a carve-out zone, and that those schools be protected from some of the other competing interests of the district. And what I'm noticing in these settings, and I think Jennifer is an anomaly to that, is that the leaders they're not stable. Linda was saying earlier today, the teachers in these settings are going to ask, are you going to be there next year? And they're very, very unstable, highly transient places, not only at the teacher and student mobility level, but at the leader level. Mm-hmm. And we know this work takes longer than 3 years. It is seated for 3 years, but we know it takes longer. We've heard Jennifer tell us she's been there for 5 years, and it's not where the system needs to be yet. But the district itself does not have the sensibility to say that, you know, this is a protected area. And when you come in, this leader is going to go in knowing what the commitment is, knowing what the resources are, knowing what the expectations are. The school leaders I've talked to recently did not know that they were a SIG recipient coming into these buildings. They weren't the authors of a SIG grant. They didn't know what the role of the lead partner was. They didn't know what the expectations were for this, you know, transparency and co-governance, really. And that's one of the things I'm surprised about, and I think that's an area of work for us, is to really remind the districts about the fiduciary responsibility that they have to use these funds wisely, because I'm seeing a lot of start over right now. And our team can talk with you more about that. Robin, who has been leading this work statewide, Ray, Mary Beth, who's in the room, I think they would concur, and their insights are based on deep experience. So I hope later on today, during this open technology phase, that they will emerge as leaders, and that you will seek them out for some of their personal experiences. But they remain very vulnerable settings, even though they have this fund infusion. They are reaching a point now, some of them, where there's not enough step-down planning. There's not enough thought about the commingling of other resources that might take them to the next level. And the fact of the matter is that even in school-wide Title I buildings, most of those Title I funds are committed to staff that are already critical to the success of the organization. There aren't additional resources to put these additional staff members into. So it's a conundrum, but I am surprised by still the movement that we have at the leader level. And we all know that outside of the classroom practitioner, that the office of the principal is the most important role holder in all of this.
Great. And so my last question before I turn it over to Daniel, and if there's not any other questions from the floor, is from your perspectives here at the table, can you describe the type of supports that you think are key to support your work doing this turnaround work at your levels?
You know, I think from our perspective as providing support, it's critical that, one, that we as the people that are going to support these districts and schools, you know, have the training and expertise and understanding of what that work looks like. And I say that because, you know, a lot of that is past the relationship piece, and knowing that they can believe and trust in us is knowing that the people that they're going to be working with can provide them examples of what the work should look like, and how do we support them, and tangible things that they can have in order to be supported in this. The second piece is that, you know, I think leaders need to feel supported, as everyone else up here said, but also that they can be courageous as well. And that's the challenge, is about having those conversations with all of their stakeholders, and what does that mean, without the fear of, this could be my last year in the district, or my second, you know, year, maybe my last year in the district, to be able to sustain some of that work. And it's tough because you're talking about sensitive issues that for many years a lot of communities don't want to talk about. When you talk about let's have a discussion around data and what that means, even though, you know, the community and the district may know what that looks like and they've seen it, but to really have all the stakeholders there and talk about it, it's scary, it's challenging. So leaders really need to be courageous and have the support to know that even if they bring this to the table, it's not going to be the end of their career and time there. So those are two things I think are important for this work as well.
Describe supports that you need. Anybody at the table?
Well, I guess the mindset I have, Evan, in my district is, and I think I shared this with you, I might not be there tomorrow because I might say something that makes them unhappy or uneasy. So I'm committed to doing what's best for our students, understanding that I'm taking that risk as a leader, putting myself, the school improvement grant team, our principals out there So as the district leader, I take the hard hits when it comes to doing what's best for our students. So when you're talking about supporting a building principal, they definitely, the building principal and the district office, central office, they have to have the shared vision. And then the district office has to have the support of the state board or the Center for School Improvement to come in and say, at the time, Robin Stoudemire, who's our principal consultant through the state board, has been to our district several times and is willing to have that conversation and say, and now that we have the Center for School Improvement, the same thing. Karen, our DL, has been to a school board. So if I need that support from a district perspective, that somebody else can deliver the message, and that's kind of going back to what Evan said as well, so I'm bringing it full circle, but Robin can come in and say, this is what you need to do, school board. Evan can come in and say, this is what you need to do, school board, but then I have to be willing as the leader to implement it. And a lot of your principals and superintendents you might encounter might need that capacity building and a book study around change leadership if that's something you've identified as resource or research. And it's just, you can't ever teach the administrator what it's like until you've actually walked in the shoes. So just being supportive and being there, and the financial resources are huge, and that's a big barrier in Illinois. You want us to do all of this, but where's the money? And if you're in an affluent school, you don't have the same problems that you do, but most of your priority districts, my guess is, they have high poverty and they're low income.
Right.
So as far as supports, that's from a district perspective, I need the Center for School Improvement or the state board to come in and say, yes, this is what you need to do because it's right for your students. And the one thing as far as a surprise, going back to I'm a processor and a reflector, the students, when we committed to this change, we had to work on climate and culture the first year. We're in year 2.5 of our SIG, we're transitioning. I believe it should be 5 years, but that's, I say that a lot. So when you hear the context of I've been there 5 years, it took me 2 years to get the resources to do the turnaround I wanted. So really as far as change, it's been occurring for 2.5 years. Our student climate and culture was that of high school students no eye contact. Now you walk into the school and it's a very vibrant place. The students were the easiest to change. It's the adults in the building that are the most resistant. And I think Linda can attest to that. Our students are wonderful. They just need somebody to care about them. Even if they're a senior that's 6 foot tall and the basketball, the football player, whatever you want to say, sometimes they need a hug too. And our high school teachers, sometimes don't understand that the relationship is so important in a high poverty area because it's all about relationships for those kids. That's what they know. They don't have our middle class values if you're from a middle class background. So that's something I reflected upon as others were talking, so thank you for letting me share that.
You could keep talking for the rest of the day, Jennifer. You have the floor. Don, anything you want to share?
I think a lot has been said. I think that if we divide those in 2 areas, I think I like to compartmentalize some things so I can organize them in my mind. But if we look at the operational, the task kinds of things, the org development pieces, and then the relationship, human side of things. So on the organization task kinds of side would be the data on the school, on what's going on, the trend. Frameworks are extremely important in terms of what are the expectations and competencies and have those laid out. To give you an example, in Chicago, there is a principal evaluation. Then we have ISLIC standards. National Learning Forward has their competencies for PD. There are so many different competencies that a principal sits there and says, what are the expectations? What am I following? As support that we do through Illinois Principals Association, through the Illinois Center, which ones do we address as we formulate and say, well, we're going to build your skills in these 5 areas, which could be those 6 areas, which could be those 4 areas, which could be these other 5. They all align, but the consistency of expectations, goals, where is that going? I think that helps establish consistency. And Jennifer, as you said, it eliminates some of that fear and risk and tension that goes through that. Resources in general, and the resources can be experts that can come in to help out with knowledge. Could be just facilitating. Can we get someone to help with our English department? Just facilitate, because I don't want to jump in there, but if we get someone to come in and help with that. We're trying to build a science program. Can we get one of your specialists to help knowledge of the science program? And I think the biggest piece there, and Evan, you really hit it on the head, how do we build that trust and collaboration so that, Jennifer, as you said too, they're not coming through the door and say, well, I've got all the answers. If you just do what I say, it'll work. But that goes to that human side. So the data, the evidence, the frameworks all come in into play there. And what's objective out there, whether it's through the Interactive Illinois Report Card, what's working in school similar to what I have that I can implement and talk to that person or that group so that I don't have to reinvent the wheel, all from a curriculum issue, an instructional issue, to some of the other areas, Dan, that you talk about in terms of departments at odds and so on, relationship pieces. And then that's the second piece, just relationship. Do I have someone who's going to coach me, as I said before? Do I have someone that I can talk to readily who will share, listen to what I'm saying, get the context, rather than say, well, you know what you need to do, Don, is 1, 2, and 3. Are they hearing the context? Are they developing that piece? And is there someone that I can work with, because I think school change is so strategic in how we use people and develop those people, to develop my skills and to develop a team within that school that works collaboratively with outside groups of the district. Where is that relationship building? I need to really think through conversations that I'm going to have and plan those, and I think that's one of the biggest pieces in school change. The effective, we look at hard conversations, difficult conversations, all those books are out there. How do we have those conversations to communicate effectively to get results quickly and motivate people and bring people on and see other people's views?
Great. Any questions from the audience? Can you? There's a mic up there, but if you could shout it out and give it to them, so that way, yeah. So we're recording it, so that's why we like the mic, yeah.
When you talk about, research talks about there's something you have to look at and decide, what do I do right the first time, because I have to get it right the first time. I'm thinking for Jennifer and Don, as you look back in your experience, what was the first thing that you did, first major change, and then how did you decide what that major change would be?
As far as the very first thing I did, and it's going from theory to practice is what I call. So I knew the theory, but I taught in a high-performing district. So I brought that to the table, that was the expectation as a teacher. That's what I knew. So bringing all the theory into piece to write the school improvement grant, but then putting it into practice. So I have to have the vision, but my vision, if you would go and pick up the school improvement grant that I wrote, have we changed? Yes. But I always think of like the highway. We have to keep our focus, but how we get there is going to change along the way. So the theory to practice piece is really how I started, and just understanding that if you're working in a low-performing district or school and you come from a background of high-performing, there's a huge disconnect, and still to this day we will talk and it's just like, that's not been the expectation in their district, and if the teacher has only taught in that district for so long, that's all they know. So make sure as a coach or a district liaison that you're willing, just as we want teachers to relate and connect where our students are, you have to connect where the teachers are at that moment in time if you're going to get them to move forward.
And I think that moving forward is, how do you quickly accelerate that to move forward is what I looked at. I don't think I could say there was one thing, and I think that maybe that would be a downfall in any organization, is to look at 1, 2, and 3, and if we can solve this group or this program or this curriculum item versus it is a very complex system. So as I look back, the first thing, and I think Jennifer, you alluded to it, you chose to go in here. And when I looked at school, I had all kinds of different things open, and I chose to go in, but I did research. I knew everything about it, so I knew it would be a fit for me. That this was something I liked, I wanted, I would embrace everything that was there, knowing I wouldn't see it all. So that to me is the first piece. Do we know the information before we choose this? The second piece is going, and then I did focus groups. I talked to parents, kids, the staff. I had formal and informal, and when I left the school, I still had my 3 pages of all the issues they wanted. So now that I know that, the first thing I did, in essence then, was I created small change. We don't like the way the kids come in the building. Okay, we can change that. That didn't affect anyone. We want a coffee machine. Any little thing, we didn't have books. Well, let's look at the books. So there was, I think in the first week, we put in about 30 changes, but they were simple. They were just cosmetic as I look at them, but they were important to them, but it brought them in. So that comes to what did I really think was important? I got to moving ahead, which was changing out of 55 teachers, I probably changed 30 of their roles. But it wasn't a top-down, it was on the phone in the building. It took a week to massage this and work with people and get it, and we finally got it. So that's why I say it wasn't a first step, let's go in and just do this, but I couldn't have done that without those other steps, knowing the building, getting information, selling some little points, and all of that happened within a 3-week period. Yes.
And I know you're doing district needs assessments right now, and that was, we really brought people to the table, and the community voice of the low-income parent, I think, was the most eye-opening, and we had to remember that voice because we have a small group of parents that do everything, and we made that commitment to bring some uncomfortable people to the table when we did our district needs assessment, because at that time we had a lot of problems. So we're still working on them, but that district needs assessment was meaningful for us. So if there's something, I know you're doing that work in the field now, and I haven't seen your district needs assessment, but ours was the standard school improvement grant needs assessment, but we made sure we had all the stakeholders at the table and make that meaningful. That has to be the next step with these districts.
Great. We have time for one more question. Can you come up to the mic since we're recording it, please? Thank you.
I feel very brazen asking for a few moments when we haven't yet heard from our final speaker, and we look forward to it. So I invite the panel to either reply now or later in the comment, if you'd rather. But I'm just stuck pondering something that Linda actually mentioned about an organic approach to our context, to families and communities that might recognize assets where they've gone undetected before. And you just started to speak about bringing even the uncomfortable stakeholders to the table to hear their voice. And I think all the mentioning of listening, the importance of listening nods to the importance of context as well. So my question, especially for the practitioners, is even more in-depth specific examples of how we were able to capitalize unexpected assets within your families and your communities as you move forward in the process. So for now or later.
Now.
Thank you.
That's still one of our biggest challenges, is building the relationships with our parents in our community. That's one piece. If there's, from our district leadership team, that's one of our goals, is parent and community involvement. And right now we're working with, because we have the active PTO and we have a parent and community liaison, it's having those hard conversations. Those are the conversations we're having now. We've had successful parent community involvement activities, and then we've had some not so successful. But the biggest thing is most of the parents in my community are not comfortable coming into the school. So our parent community liaison that we've been able to pay for through the grant initially did home visits. Our social worker was doing home visits to build that relationship, and it's not, even though I want to seem approachable, and I believe I am, I still have a title which intimidates people. And that's just the reality I've had to accept. When they hear my story and they take time to listen to my story of my background, then I can make that connection. But they don't see me in that light because I have the suit and the heels and I'm Mrs. Garrison to them. So it's finding somebody that they felt comfortable with first. It's still a challenge for us. We haven't solved the problem, but I would say that would be our first step, is trying. It's not usually the superintendents that's going to be able to make those first initial connections with the parents from, and again, speaking from our perspective, the low-income families that are not comfortable walking into the door and even saying hi to me.
I think, and those are all going to be bringing people together to collaborate, right? So building that larger scale acceptance, buy-in, and role in terms of responsibilities and those talents that can come forth. Things that we did was we built an advisory team. So in Chicago we have local school councils that advise, they hire the principal, they advise on the budget, well, they approve the budget and curriculum. But what we did is formed an advisory team with community people as well as parents to bring forth their talents. So we had an accountant on there, we had someone who worked with the Department of Streets and Sanitation, we had someone who was in marketing, we have just a mom who was at home with kids, to get this spectrum of connections, talents, and we would meet monthly, and we would put things on the table and say, you know, what do you think? Shoot it down. Anything that's wrong. If this was in your organization as a mom at home, as an attorney with a law firm, what would you think of this? What's right with it? What's wrong with it? I thought that was really an objective, helpful, plus they brought a lot of resources because of that. They didn't know we needed things. So we had, one of the guys was a manager of the building with the Willis Tower, and a company was closing down. He sent us a ton of furniture and computers and so on. We would never had that had we not tapped into those kinds of things. Building the parent skill was key, so we built a parent university, which involved not just parenting and how to work with your kids at home, but also ESL. There's a high population of limited English kids and families. So we built their English skill, which in turn allowed them to not only help themselves in jobs, but also communicate better with other parents at the school and build those skills. So bringing parents together, we also then trained parents as school volunteers. So these were not the people, and that was the mentality of some, good, they can run my copies for me. These were trained teacher aides that we actually brought in an outside person. We worked with them, monthly sessions to update their knowledge. They were trained aides that worked so we could differentiate, have small groups across the board, and we had about 50 of those. So, and they couldn't work with their own child because this way they got to see other grade levels. And then lastly, the staff leadership was a key piece that we specifically, it was, again, that was kind of my area, so it was easier, but it was leveled or latticed throughout. So we had teachers who just wanted to take on a leadership role and became chairs of their grade level, and then we had clusters of grade levels that were headed by another level of leadership who wanted to become maybe a lead bilingual, special ed program, or move into an AP position. Then I had the people who had type 75s who would then lead massive pieces. We had 2 floors and there were 4 buildings. So they were in charge of actually a building to build their skill. And then there was training associated with each. So we have monthly meetings to train the team leaders on how to run meetings, how to lead, again, on how to run a meeting, how to communicate, we coach. So they were receiving monthly training, facilitation on how to fulfill their roles to build that confidence. Because, and I think that was mentioned by someone, these leadership roles, people may want to, but they don't want to go out there without that support, just as we don't want to do that. So that training and support was key. To just say, well, you take this on, they were not willing to do it, and then even if you put them in there, they could falter because they didn't have the training and support. So those were the key areas.
Don, can I comment on the what's been said here? Shanna, I so appreciate the question, and you know, when teams establish norms, one of the norms that I've noticed that I really respond to is equity of voice, and I think this is partly about equity of voice and about having families and communities be co-determiners of the change effort. One thing that you might consider if you are working around the Rising Star Continuous Improvement Planning process is this notion of an open chair. How respectful would it be if you're working on a family and community engagement indicator to bring in a small group of families and have them react to that indicator and share their experience in terms of how they feel within the school community and whether or not there are opportunities for them to express their capacity as a leader on behalf of their children. I can't think of anything that's more, that has a higher regard for that equity a voice, you know, then incorporating some things that will be long-lasting and sustainable. And I think one of the reasons that I mentioned Rising Star and this whole notion of a systemic continuous improvement planning model is because leaders do come and go. It is the fact of the matter. And what better succession plan than to have something that's been agreed to by all stakeholders in the community that really is a gift then to the next leader who inherits that community to say, this represents our beliefs today, read, think about them, learn with us, take us to the next level, but here's what we've been thinking about before you came. And so that's why, you know, all of your comments about listening first, I think are so important and so respectful. And I just have always thought of myself as a guest in the role. You know, when I came into my principalship, and there's Lori and Linda and Rick, who know me from that work, I thought I was hoping I would be there forever. And if I could have stayed forever, I might have. But I was really worn out also, because it's very difficult work, as Jennifer has expressed so well. And so I accept today that